Hi everyone, and welcome back to my No Buy Year. Today is kind of a story time about how I used to be much more insecure. So something that comes with posting content on YouTube or on a public platform is criticism about your appearance or your mannerisms, and I have mercifully been lucky enough to not receive very much of this. I honestly was anticipating to get comments about things like how bad my teeth are or how I look weird or something, but most of the comments about things like that for me have actually been about my voice and how I might be faking it because I have such a deep voice. I had one comment say that I'm like Elizabeth Holmes, which I had to look that up because I actually was totally unaware of the whole Theranos scandal or whatever, and I guess she faked a deep voice. And this is not a fake voice, so I'm not making this video to clap back at comments saying that I have a fake voice, but I was making this video because some of these comments, as well as some other comments on some of my fashion videos, the videos where I show outfits and talk about how I like to buy clothes, talked about feelings of insecurity, feelings of being unhappy with one's body image. And I wanted to just share a little bit of my journey and perhaps talk it out on camera because even I don't fully know where this is going to go when I start today. I do think that while I'm not sure that my feelings of insecurity are very closely connected with my own personal shopping habits, because my feelings of insecurity were very apparently not something I could buy my way out of. But I do think that there is some connection there, and perhaps we'll uncover it together as I tell my story in an organic way. In some ways, this is a journey of being insecure, especially about this one particular issue that I'm about to share with you, to being not insecure about that anymore. Not to say that I'm not an insecure person at all. There are definitely times where I'm going to feel insecure about specific things, but the days that I feel insecure about my appearance or any aspect of my appearance have become much, much fewer and far between. And sometimes they can be pinpointed to how I'm expressing myself, what I'm wearing. I think I shared earlier this year about how when I wore an outfit that seemed very masculine, androgynous, I did feel a little bit, I wouldn't say insecure, but I wasn't totally happy with what I was wearing, and I wanted to go and change so that my outfit wasn't so one-dimensional. But that might be a little bit of a different nuance to this conversation. So let me jump into the story that I was planning on telling for this video, exploring my physical insecurities. So to get into gear, let me show you my footwear today, because this is an important part of my insecurity puzzle. Hopefully I'm not totally messing up the microphone here. So I, as you may know, am quite a tall person. I'm about 5'10" or 178, 79 centimeters, if I'm getting that right. And when I was in high school, middle school, early adulthood, I really felt this pain of being tall, and I would never have worn shoes with any kind of a heel like these. And, while this outfit might be debatably stylish, it's definitely a look to wear athletic track pants with heeled leather boots like this. But, this is not necessarily a styling video. This is a video about my feelings of former insecurity that I've now overcome. And am happy to report that I no longer feel trepidation, other than possible trips and back pain, about wearing high-heeled shoes. The thought does not occur to me anymore that I'll be too tall if I put heels on like this. And alas, I will not do the whole video in this position. I can already feel the strain on my core muscles from not having worked out enough, probably. But today is not the day to get that workout, so I will put my feet back down and resume this conversation from my typical seated position. Back to the story. When I was a younger adult or teenager, I intensely felt the desire to not be as tall as I am. And obviously that's not something I could control. And even issues that you can control that are physical, right? Some people would like to be taller, if they're short, and you can wear heels, but ultimately you can't control the height that you are. Some people would like to be, would like to weigh more or weigh less or have a more curvy figure, or, I used to even be among that group. But I have reached the age where I don't even care. Nothing can make me care about how my body naturally is. And there's a sense of actual freedom, a sense of further freedom in not having chosen any aspects of how I look, beyond, surface level makeup and clothing. But as far as surgical modifications, I have not chosen to modify anything, and therefore nobody can have an issue with my body. It's not something that I could choose. Not that anybody should have issues if somebody did choose aspects of their body. That's not what I'm trying to say here. All I'm trying to say is that there is an aspect of freedom in embracing who you are naturally, as far as how you were made, how you were created, and there can be a sense of comfort even if you're not getting cosmetic surgery, not because you don't want it, but because you can't afford it or other reasons, right? Maybe an approach to get around those feelings of possible desire is that sense of freedom that does come with the knowledge that this is natural, this is my natural voice, even if that's something that's bothered you as a viewer. But if we can view it from that lens of this is how I was created, and therefore if you don't accept it, it's not my problem. It's not my job to make my body look attractive to you or acceptable to you. This is how I exist. So there's that. Call that the thesis of the video, right? It's not my responsibility to make myself look better to other people. The final frontier, perhaps, is making yourself look better to you, though. I do feel like many people do eventually shed the fear of judgment or opinions of others. You know, there's common advice out there suggesting that people don't care about what you look like, they're much too worried about themselves. And yes, I think this is true. And the part about people being worried about themselves also applies to you as an individual, to every one of us out there. And I do think that that's the final hurdle, because once you stop caring what other people think, to some degree, you have to reshape how you think, because you can't not care what you think about yourself. There's this war being waged in your own mind and your own feelings. So that's perhaps the more difficult step than not caring what others think. And I've seen some comments that kind of sparked a dialogue about this as well, about our own opinions about, thoughts of others. If we were to wear a designer bag that cost $5,000, for example, it's not necessarily fear of judgment from others, although that's a piece of the puzzle. But for me, I actually do own a designer bag that my mom got as a hand-me-down and then gifted to me. And I have a hard time overcoming my own judgment of myself for displaying that kind of investment piece in my wardrobe. And I can accept that this might logically be silly because I didn't pay the money for the bag. If anybody's going to judge me because they think I paid money for the bag, and if I'm going to judge myself because I don't want to be presenting as somebody who could have or values that kind of price on a bag, that's all ultimately a circumstantial sequence of thoughts that is preventing me from just using something that I already have. Now, am I still going to irrationally use this emotion of mine or this inner judgment to prevent myself from buying any designer goods? Sure. I think the conversation is a little bit different when you're trying to use tactics to stop yourself from buying new things that you don't really need. But I am also aware that that's a little bit of a kind of contradicting way of thinking, wanting to be free of this kind of judgment, but then also using this inner judgment to prevent future purchases. And ultimately, I guess I don't really feel like I need the judgment to not buy a designer handbag. I think I can intellectualize that I don't need to spend that amount of money on a clothing wardrobe purchase. So maybe it's all a moot point anyway. But once again, back to my story of intense insecurity of things like my height. I did actually used to be more insecure about things like the deepness of my voice, again, something I can't control. In the peak years of high school, when people would occasionally make comments about how deep my voice is for a female. And when there were lots of comments about how the weather is up where I'm at because was so much taller than my peers at that age. And I guess still am now. I mean, the average height in my country is still probably 5'5" for a female, and so I am significantly taller than the average, even as an adult. And there is advice out there. There are kind of solidarity and support videos for tall people, or sources of support on the internet, even if it's not in video form. There are accounts dedicated to celebrating tallness and people celebrating all sorts of body shapes and sizes and conditions and various abilities and disabilities and ethnicities and anything under the sun these days. One of the positive things about social media is the increased representation that we see in society and how people have the accessibility to be more present in online society than they do sometimes in real life society. So that's a wonderful thing. But even looking to these sources of tall women support, let's just say, I found limited help in their advice. You know, it's things like just wear heels regardless. If anybody cares about that, it's on them and it's not on you. That kind of thing is great to hear. And it might contribute to an environment that fosters the ability to come to terms with it as a person, you know, inside myself. But again, it can't do the work of growth for me. So I'm not trying to discount these sources as cultivators, you know, environmental factors that lead to feeling the security to grow personally. But it can't do all of the heavy lifting. Consuming this kind of support content or looking to these sources of positive influence or finding external validation, none of it is a substitute for going on that personal journey, for having the life experiences, or even consciously designing the environment. You know, sometimes following these accounts or sources of inspiration, influence can be a part of cultivating that environment, but it's not the whole picture. I guess an in real life example would be to not hang out with people who make comments about your appearance in a negative way. You can kind of remove those negative influences from your life just as much as you can try to cultivate the positive ones. But I think the biggest piece of the puzzle of insecurity versus security for me is that piece that I kind of already talked about of accepting that I didn't choose to be the way that I am physically. And there are limited things that I can do to change how I appear physically. And all these things are not things that I think anybody should feel obligated to do. You know, wearing makeup, dressing strategically. There's the argument to be made that I, as a tall person, don't need to wear high heels, but that's not the only reason why people wear heeled shoes, right? It can be a fashion statement. It can just be fun. There are reasons beyond adding height that people add height to their wardrobe, to their look as a whole. Nor should people who aren't tall feel obligated to add height to be taller. But the example of the heeled shoe is one that serves, at least for me, to illustrate how far I've come in my path from being insecure to being secure. Because the me of high school teenage years would never wear high-heeled shoes. In fact, I would obsess over how much height my sneakers would add. You know, I would never wear platform sneakers. I would look for the thinnest soles possible, the flattest insole. I'd even sometimes take out the insole for fear that it was adding half a centimeter to my overall height, as if that made a difference. And it goes beyond clothes as well. I was having this conversation with somebody in a comment that insecurity can be felt in many arenas. The specific conversation that I'm speaking of was actually about jobs, making money, making income, a level of income. Before I had experiences in both New Zealand and in Houston, Texas in particular, I was very much of the feeling, of the mindset, of the mentality that anything for money, anything to accumulate more money, to have more security, more stability. It would be great to not have to work all the time. Let's look at the FIRE movement. But I've come to realize as well that not working is not a fulfilling life for me. I have ways that I can work, and I'm also not above working at a grocery store or something like that, working fast casual food. That's not the end of the world. There can be many good things to be had out of even that kind of experience that's not ideal or aspirational. And indeed, I did live that life while I lived in Pennsylvania before moving to Houston. The thing that living in Texas made me realize as well, though, that opportunities can be had if you're willing to go where you're needed. And that's another thing that I'm really not afraid to do in my life anymore, and I don't feel stuck in one place. And these are things that were taught to me by life experience. Before I'd had those experiences, I did feel much more insecure as far as my ability to make money and how much money that I needed to feel stable. I still talk about how I would like to have more of an emergency fund as far as, we're homeowners now, and as far as being financially smart, that would be the thing to do. But ultimately, I am not living in a constant feeling of insecurity like I used to for much of that time, based on all of these things, right? Not even just based on one facet of insecurity. I used to feel financially insecure, work insecure, like I wouldn't be able to get a job, insecure about how tall I was, insecure about how bad my teeth are, insecure about my weight at the time, how much or little I weighed. It's almost like I was saying that anything can be a reason to shop, anything can turn into a sales pitch, anything can be a reason to be insecure as well. If you're fixated on it in a particular kind of way, it can become a negative drain on your energy rather than a neutral or a positive kind of empowering aspect of who you are. And I guess, in some way, the heeled shoe symbolizes that I'm now empowered by something like my height. And again, not in an exclusive way. It's not to say that if you're not tall, you don't have power where I have power. Like, not at all. It's about how I was dealt this hand of height of, 5 feet 10 inches of me in a vertical sense, and not having the power to change that. I do have the power to embrace that and to kind of allow myself to feel myself in a way through my being, how I am, how I was made, and to not have any shame in that. And even when it comes to matters of things like weight that we feel like we can control, I don't like the idea that people feel shame over how they currently exist. There's some element of how time plays a role in this. Something like weight is not constant, right, for all of one's life. If one chooses to pursue a lower weight or a higher weight, we have some agency in changing this about ourselves. There are conditions that limit this agency, as I know firsthand from having thyroid issues and trying to change my weight and not being successful, at least at this time. So I understand that. But generally, we think about things like weight as something we have a sense of agency over. We think about things like body shape to an extent. You can work out, you can gain weight or lose weight, or kind of manipulate how fit you look in some ways. If we're speaking of you can exercise and gain muscle or have some kind of control over how you look in those ways, associated to health, which again makes it another realm of insecurity that we're possibly opening up here. But the way that these things are all attached as well to points in time and are endeavors that take time to go from point A to point B in, right? Changing your appearance in the terms of adding or removing weight, or adding or losing muscle, or even things like growing your hair, right? Cutting your hair, regrowing it. All these things take time, and time is not within our control either. So I have many reservations with the narrative that people look the way they do because of their own doing. And when it's not something that's in our control, I think the way to reach security from insecurity is a different path than when it's something completely in our control. Or at least the social narrative is different. There's more of the narrative of accepting who you are if it's something you didn't choose, and working to change something about who you are if it's something that you can choose. Now, I'm also not saying that it's good to exist in a state of unhealthiness if you do have the power to change that, or if you do have the desire to change that. So this conversation is not meant to be skewed, or, I don't want my statements to be taken out of context in this video. I know that's the danger you run anytime you post anything online though, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But I guess maybe the final thing that I have to say on this subject is that the path to being more secure is a worthy one to pursue. I think it's similar to that philosophical idea that knowing thyself is one of life's main pursuits, if not the main pursuit of life. And I think embracing thyself and being secure with oneself and being content, having acceptance, having compassion for oneself, that's another piece of popular advice, right? Treat yourself like you would treat somebody else, or speak to yourself like you would a child, or, if you wouldn't say mean things to somebody else, don't say mean things to yourself in your head. Again, I think all of these things are positive environmental factors to surround yourself with, the messages to surround yourself with, in order to create that environment of change in you. So it doesn't replace doing the work, but it definitely helps take steps in the right direction. It helps you feel secure enough, feel empowered enough, feel safe to take those steps, to experiment, to bathe in positive influence, if you will, and make that progress in a way that feels authentic and is supported by your influences in society. But anyway, it's a worthy pursuit, not only because you'll be less vulnerable to marketing and less apt to buying things and less of a sitting duck for people and companies and entities at large that want to take advantage of people like you or people in that position, looking for ways to feel better, looking for the path to feeling more secure, willing to put money down in some cases for promises of being shown that path, willing to walk behind people who preach being able to show you that path. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's between you and yourself. There's no entity exterior that can do any of this work for you. That applies to no buy and all of the kind of other emotional things that I brought up in this video, in this conversation. So I guess the message that I leave you with today is when somebody says you go and rock whatever you want to wear, you don't need to feel insecure about it. I hope that you believe that to be true, even if you don't currently feel free to act like it is. And I hope you believe it to be true not because things like how you look don't matter, but because you have a sense that that place of acceptance and security does exist, and that you will get there eventually. I believe that you can get there if you want to. All right, this is a little bit of a weird, deep, and introspective one, I guess. But again, if I can do it, I know you can do it too. There's nothing special about me and my abilities of reflection, honestly. The fact that I've never been able to keep a journal or have any form of accountability in that regard until starting to make videos for YouTube, of all things, I think is a testament to that. On that note, I will say bye for now and see you in the next one.